Hello to all astrology enthusiasts. In this video, I want to discuss the transit of the planet Mercury in the zodiac sign of Cancer and its impact on our lives, how its energies manifest, what situations they create in our lives, and how we can ground these energies to our advantage. The planet Mercury enters the sign of Cancer on June 9th at 2 a.m. and this transit will last until June 26, 2025 until 10 p.m. And Mercury in Cancer is definitely different from the previous Mercury in Gemini. And before we look at its characteristics in this zodiac sign, let me remind you what Mercury is generally associated with in astrology. First of all, Mercury symbolizes the mind, speech, our intellect, logic, the exchange of information, and in general, the themes of perception and mobility. In other words, these very processes, so to speak, are precisely what the planet Mercury brings into focus. Mercury itself rules Gemini and Virgo in the horoscope, as well as the 3rd and 6th houses in the natal chart. Overall, Mercury is our internal mediator between the outer and inner worlds, the one who analyzes and structures. It explains, it translates our experiences into words. Mercury is the main planet responsible for how we think, how we process information, and how we make decisions. Its position in the natal chart shows what kind of thinking strategy we use, whether it's quick, intuitive, systematic, or logical. It also shows how we perceive the world around us, how easily we learn, and how well we adapt to new information. In addition, Mercury governs all forms of communication. This includes spoken, written, and nonverbal forms. Accordingly, its condition in the chart shows how we express our thoughts, how we interact with others, and how we receive and transmit knowledge. Additionally, Mercury is responsible for our movement, our mobility, especially for short trips, getting around the city, and business trips. It also governs transportation, documents, letters, packages, couriers, everything that ensures the exchange and circulation of information and resources. Moreover, Mercury is a symbol of learning, school education, trainings, and seminars. It precisely embodies our interest in gathering and transmitting information. And people who have an active Mercury with good aspects, who have it well expressed, are eternal students. They always need to be aware of everything new, everything that's happening, and to understand things in detail. This is exactly what Mercury shows us in the natal chart. Besides that, Mercury is not about deep, profound knowledge. It's more about facts, logic, and the connections between them. It's a solid foundation for any kind of mental activity that is teaching, marketing, programming, journalism, blogging. All of this is governed by Mercury. In addition, it gives us the ability to analyze, think logically, connect data with each other, and build step-by-step plans. In business, in our careers, and in everyday life, it helps us create strategies. It gives us solutions to various problems. It helps us see cause and effect relationships. But if we talk about a deeper level, Mercury shows us our inner mirror. That is how we perceive ourselves, what we think about ourselves, how we conduct our inner dialogue. And its position can also tell us about our self-esteem, our self-criticism, or on the contrary, about confidence, which is consciously projected. And another interesting trait of Mercury is its neutrality. That is, it is quite an impartial planet. Mercury does not judge. It simply gathers information and transmits it. And that is why in mythology, this planet was considered the messenger of the gods, capable of serving both good and evil. And Mercury can be, so to speak, both a wise advisor and a cunning manipulator in our lives. It all depends on the context. And I'll also remind you that Mercury goes retrograde 3 or 4 times a year. And during its retrograde period, it becomes more introspective. That is, it directs our attention inward. And this is a time when we review various contracts, agreements, redo certain projects, correct mistakes, and revise reports. We inevitably encounter the return of certain old contacts, people from the past. And in general, during Mercury retrograde, our processes of learning and communication tend to slow down. If we're talking about the indicator of retrograde Mercury in a natal chart, it can suggest, for example, that a person has unconventional thinking and delves deeply into internal dialogues. They have a talent for research or conducting deep analysis. On the downside, it can also result in difficulties with quickly conveying information or challenges with socialization in childhood, for example, if we're talking about a child. Now let's look at the specific characteristics of Mercury in the zodiac sign of Cancer. Here, Mercury in Cancer generally gives us a unique combination of our intellect and our emotions, because during this transit, the energies of intuitive thinking, emotional speech, and deep memory are activated. And we have an increased need for emotional security overall during this transit. Here, Mercury does not think in logical patterns during this transit. Instead, it feels the thought, it feels the word. In other words, there is a more intuitive experience and sensing happening here. It's a kind of unique sensual intellectuality. And during this transit, our thinking becomes colored specifically by emotions. We perceive information through sensations, through atmosphere, through associations. This is an imaginative mind that perceives not so much the words themselves, but the intonation, gestures, and mood. Mercury in Cancer is also closely and deeply connected to family history, to memories, especially those emotional traces from childhood. And we may remember the tiniest details of conversations, especially if they were connected to close people and evoked strong feelings in us. In addition, during this transit, our communication is built specifically on trust, because Mercury in Cancer does not like pressure, criticism, or any kind of public judgment. He prefers to share his thoughts in a cozy, protected environment among his own. And Mercury in Cancer seems to know how to speak in a way that words can heal. In communication, there is a softness, attentiveness, an ability to encourage, and an ability to create an emotional shelter, so to speak. And often during this transit, we feel that we know exactly what we need to say, so that, for example, the other person, our conversation partner, opens up more. Now let's look at how the energy of Mercury in Cancer manifests on 3 levels: the mental, the emotional, and the physical levels. And first of all, on the mental level, as I mentioned, we experience intuitive thinking, and we start to think not in a linear way, but as if in waves, figuratively, through feelings and memories, through associations. During this transit, our rationality is subordinated specifically to this kind of emotional logic. I feel it, therefore it is true for me. If we talk about thinking that is oriented toward the past, here the analysis happens precisely through comparison with experience. We might ask ourselves questions like, how was it before? What did we feel back then? And here a phenomenon can arise where we mentally return to certain old situations. Here, during this transit, we may remember details that are connected to personal stories, certain smells, and internal states. In other words, our thinking here feels more viscous, more closed off. If we talk about the emotional level, heightened empathy may manifest in our communications here. That is, we pick up on the subtlest, slightest changes in other people's intonation, facial expressions, and moods. And Mercury in Cancer seems to hear not only the words, but also the feelings between the lines. During this transit, our words serve as protection, as a shelter. In other words, we use our speech to create a sense of a home-like atmosphere. In other words, we speak in a way that allows our conversation partners to feel calm, safe, warm, and comfortable. And usually during this transit, it is emotions that actually dictate the topics of conversation in general. That is, we talk a lot about subjects related to family, home, childhood, and share personal stories that show more care for our loved ones. Well, if we're talking about the physical level, this can manifest through non-verbal communication, such as a warm voice, for example, or smooth gestures, and a more friendly facial expression. And here we often use touch. We rely more on eye contact because it is an essential part of communication. In addition, the tone of our speech is quieter, softer, and more caring. We speak a little more slowly, almost in a homely way. And in general, we want a calm atmosphere. We don't like noise during this transit or any kind of pressure or crowds. Often we just want to be alone. Because if there's also an overload of information, then of course we naturally want to shut ourselves off. And when it comes to actions, real learning actually happens much more through support, through a genuinely caring attitude. And we often hear homely examples like, this is how it was at our house, for instance. Overall, during this transit, information is best absorbed through personal experience, especially when it's connected to everyday life or emotionally charged situations. Now let's look at the main aspects to pay attention to during Mercury's transit through Cancer. Mercury actually began its transit with a sextile to Venus in Taurus, giving us a very gentle, harmonious, and cozy energy in communication and the expression of our feelings. Overall, this aspect encourages a warm, caring exchange of information, thoughts, and ideas. This is especially true when it comes to topics related to home and family. Here you might experience pleasant conversations, agreements, or perhaps support in financial and material matters, as well as in personal romantic relationships. In general, when this aspect is active, it's always easy for us to find common ground with people and loved ones, to create a comfortable atmosphere in relationships, and to plan or organize something together, some shared plans. It helps us express our feelings very delicately, very attentively, and we are able to really hear and listen to our partner. And of course, this allows us to strengthen our interactions and our connections. Also, on this day, we have two squares involving Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and they bring a tense, complex, mentally and emotionally charged energy. Our thoughts, our feelings, they come up against our internal limitations, our illusions, and this aspect itself can create situations of misunderstanding, confusion, and doubt in our lives, especially regarding matters related to our initiatives and personal boundaries. In addition, this aspect can cause delays in certain communications or a feeling of fatigue or some mental blocks and difficulties with concentration, as well as trouble making decisions. Here we may experience internal conflicts between our desire to act impulsively and the need to actually think things through and structure some information. And this creates a certain frustration. Also, here we have Mercury conjunct the star Menkalinan, and here there is quite a vivid dynamic energy that still gives us quick thinking, but you need to catch hold of this energy. Here, such intellectual activity and lively communication can manifest because the star Menkalinan is specifically associated with a sharp mind, intuition, and the ability to get to the heart of things. So the aspect is quick, but it can give us depth of thought. It can give us insight. In communication, for example, creativity and expressiveness may emerge. We may find some unconventional solutions under this aspect, particularly related to home life, family, and personal relationships. In addition, it can create situations where we grasp information very quickly, conduct negotiations successfully, and find truly original approaches to solving various everyday issues. On June 11th, a long-lasting trine with a black moon in Scorpio was activated. And this energy is one of deep, intense, even somewhat mystical mental energy. Yes, in other words, the energy itself is influenced and colored by these tones, such as subtle emotional nuances. And it promotes very insightful thinking, especially when we sincerely express our hidden emotions and feelings. The aspect can help reveal certain hidden topics or suppressed emotions, bringing to light what usually remains behind the scenes of our consciousness. This is especially true for intimate relationships, certain psychological processes in our lives, and personal changes. In communication situations, intuition is heightened under this aspect, and there is an ability to read between the lines. And of course, this can help resolve difficult conflicts and get out of certain deceptions, because there is a very strong desire to speak the truth, even if it is uncomfortable. But the aspect gives us the courage to express everything just as it is. In addition, it allows us to explore our own dark sides and to see these shadow aspects in other people as well. Overall, the trine can create situations where we easily dive into deep conversations about psychology or certain spiritual matters. That's why this aspect is also very useful for working with the subconscious and with emotional blocks. On June 12th, an opposition was added between Mercury in Cancer and the retrograde asteroid Pau in Capricorn. And here, a tense and provocative energy may emerge in our lives, where thoughts and communication come up against some of our internal challenges related to past mistakes, misunderstandings, or the need to rethink some previous experience. This aspect itself can create situations where our conversations or decisions lead to doubts, reproaches, or give us a sense of guilt. This can be especially related to the professional sphere or personal relationships. Here, it is possible to revisit old misunderstandings and unresolved issues, communication errors, or the need to correct past mistakes, because retrograde Mercury points to the need to carefully and thoughtfully analyze your words and actions, not rush to conclusions, and as well as be prepared for criticism. Therefore, the main thing with this aspect is to avoid stubbornness in your beliefs and work on correcting mistakes, as well as to avoid conflicts. And of course, this will help maintain a good atmosphere in any interactions. On June 16th, a very harmonious aspect began for us. This is a trine with the retrograde asteroid Juno in Scorpio. And this aspect can give us the energy to strengthen trust, specifically through sincere communication in any kind of relationship. In other words, it specifically promotes a harmonious exchange of our thoughts and feelings in close relationships, and it helps us resolve any internal contradictions. It helps us restore connection, especially after periods of misunderstanding or a certain distance. That is, it can create situations where we discuss important issues of partnership, fidelity, and commitments. It gives us the opportunity to deepen our mutual understanding overall. It gives us the opportunity to strengthen our bonds emotionally. In general, Juno's retrograde draws attention to rethinking and reassessing past relationships. It's as if it gives us a chance to adjust or renew certain agreements on a more honest basis. And I should also note that by the 20th of June, these aspects will gradually start to subside. On June 19th, we will have a trine to the North Node in Pisces. And this is an inspiring energy, spiritually oriented, which specifically promotes the harmonious development of our thoughts and communications. And this may also be connected to themes of life purpose. This aspect gives us a flow of intuition and gentleness, empathy, helping us to more easily find our way toward new opportunities in the future. Moreover, this can happen precisely through communication or through creative self-expression. There may be situations where important conversations or significant decisions seem to guide us toward fulfilling our life goals. They may be connected to helping other people. They may be connected to spiritual quests. A trine in general enhances our ability to hear the voice of our heart. It makes it easier for us to make the right decisions and allows us to look toward the future. Of course, here, in contrast to the trine, the sextile comes into play. This is also a harmonious aspect to the South Node, which is in Virgo. And this is already a supportive energy that allows us to use some accumulated past experience, certain familiar skills in order to figure out, so to speak, our own path of development, our direction of growth in life. It helps us easily turn to tried and true methods for solving various life, everyday or family issues. And with this aspect, we can quickly find such practical solutions. We can easily handle routine tasks. We can easily finish things we've started, while also using intuition from the sign of Cancer and an analytical approach from the sign of Virgo. After all, the South Node is within us. And here, it is especially beneficial to complete any unfinished business and make room for new opportunities. On June 20th, Mercury in Cancer forms a conjunction with the star Castor, and this brings quite lively, vibrant, and specifically communication active energy. It stimulates our mental flexibility and quick information exchange. In general, the star Castor is associated with a dual nature and the ability to adapt very easily. It enhances our desire to communicate, to learn, to share ideas, information, and especially anything related to personal relationships, family, and home. There may be situations where it becomes very easy for us to find common ground with different people, quickly switch between tasks, and rapidly generate new solutions. Of course, this aspect is short-lived, but nevertheless, the energy can still be expressed. And of course, it's worth using this to your advantage. On June 22, we have Mercury in Cancer forming a square to Chiron in Aries. Here, an energy emerges of an internal conflict between our desire to express our feelings and thoughts and a fundamental fear of being rejected or misunderstood. It's quite a tense connection. It activates some of our old emotional wounds related to our self-confidence and personal boundaries. Under this aspect, we may feel sensitive to criticism. We might doubt whether we're saying the right things. We may be afraid to openly talk about our needs and our feelings. Here, situations may arise where awkward or painful conversations and topics come up with close people, when our words can hurt, can cause unintended offense. They can create difficulties in conveying our thoughts to another person at all. And of course, this leads to misunderstandings. And inner doubts, self-criticism of this arises in such situations. And we often and sometimes even unexpectedly feel as if someone is deeply scratching at our soul from within, precisely through words, gently pushing us to pay close attention to our emotional wounds and to thoughtfully reconsider our thoughts, our feelings, our words, and to protect and defend our personal boundaries. In other words, this aspect essentially gives us the opportunity not to dwell on these negative manifestations, but on the contrary, to treat ourselves with respect and move toward gentle communication. On June 23rd, there is a sextile between Mercury in Cancer and Uranus in Taurus. Uranus is already preparing to transition into Gemini. Nevertheless, the sextile will still be in effect. We can catch this energy. And this is the energy of sudden inspiration, the energy of fresh ideas, especially related to matters of home, family, finances, and personal relationships. It helps us find unconventional solutions to familiar issues very quick. For example, you might suddenly get an idea to make your home cozier, improve the atmosphere, come up with a way to optimize the family budget, or even refresh some family traditions, say, by organizing a joint celebration. Under this aspect, it's especially easy for original thoughts to arise, as well as interesting conversations that open up new opportunities and ideas for us. The sextile itself specifically supports the flexibility of our thinking. It helps us adapt to changes with curiosity rather than fear. For example, we might receive some useful advice, or we could get an unexpected job offer. We might also find an unconventional approach to solving everyday issues. So what's the main thing here? The main thing is to stay open to these new ideas and to experiment. Also on this day, there is a conjunction of Mercury in Cancer with the star Procyon in Cancer. Both the aspect and the energy overall are about a very quick mind, heightened sensitivity, and intuitive understanding. Procyon is a bright star associated with sharp perception and very rapid decision making. And that's why this aspect gives us the opportunity, since it connects with the planet of thinking, to enhance our ability to quickly grasp the essence of what's happening. At the same time, this happens through our feelings or through the expression of our care. There may be very important conversations with loved ones that help clarify emotional situations. Unexpected ideas may also arise regarding home or personal relationships. This particular aspect works very well in favor of encouraging creativity, supporting learning, and facilitating negotiations, especially if these important topics are related to family matters, or providing support and assistance to other people. On June 25, when we have the new moon in the sign of Cancer, Mercury will form 2 trines, or at least 2 trines will begin with Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And this will be an energy that combines structured thinking with our intuition. In other words, this aspect will give us a very clear, disciplined way of expressing our ideas and will inspire us. With this aspect, we can plan and implement our intentions very effectively. It's as if we feel an inner flow, allowing us to focus specifically on long-term goals in our lives. In general, such trines are very conducive to successful negotiations, launching creative projects, or immersing oneself in spiritual practices. That is, in situations where it is important to combine rationality with our imagination. For example, during these aspects, you might come up with ideas for sustainable development of your business or plans that take into account the needs of others and make projects more long-term. Overall, these aspects help maintain concentration as well as flexibility and sensitivity to the nuances of situations in our lives. On June 26, the day the zodiac sign changes, Mercury in Cancer will move into opposition with retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. This is a rather tense and highly intense energy associated with deep mental and emotional processes in our lives. During these aspects, situations of confrontation through words may arise. In other words, these are discussions and arguments that conceal our fears, certain manipulations, and suppressed emotions. Issues of control and power may also come to the forefront. The aspect can also bring about internal conflicts related to our desire for emotional security and the need to break old patterns of thinking, to step outside the boundaries of the familiar. During this aspect, there may be an increased tendency toward deep self-analysis or engaging in some kind of psychological investigation. The only thing is, it's important not to get stuck in this, because the aspect can even lead to paranoia. It's important not to use words as weapons against others at all. There may be difficult conversations with loved ones, tension at work, for example, due to clashes of opinion, or the need to reconsider your beliefs. After all, Pluto is at work here. And to get through this aspect, it's important to practice mindfulness, listen consciously, avoid manipulation, and strive to maintain emotional balance. During these aspects, Mercury will move into the sign of Leo on the 26th. In the next video, we will look at Mercury's transit through Cancer for all 12 zodiac signs and how its energies manifest. Well, I wish you all the best. Subscribe, like, and share this video.